Rebekah Roth here. One more time, I'm going to take you into the 9/11 story, and you are not going to believe the ending of this one. This is such a crazy connection that you won't even believe what you're hearing. It is completely shocking. I know my own reaction to this. That's why I'm telling you it's probably going to happen to you. So fasten your seatbelt and get ready, because I'm going to tie up some crazy loose ends, and they may be loose ends you don't even know were out there. It's really going to shock you. By the end of this video, you probably will have a lot better understanding and a lot more understanding than most people about the whole 9/11 operation. So let's start in the morning of 9/11, where the director of the CIA, George Tenet, and his mentor, David Boren, are having breakfast. I'm assuming this is in the DC area, but I haven't really seen the details. But when Tenet's aide comes and tells him at the table that a plane has hit the World Trade Center, he immediately knows it's a terrorist attack. Imagine that. He runs off to his office. I don't really know what happened to David Boren, but it really doesn't matter. But let me just tell you how those two connect. David Boren was a senator from the state of Oklahoma since 1979 until about 1994. In 1994, he became the president of the University of Oklahoma. Write that down, because it's going to keep coming back in the 9/11 story. This university is at Norman, Oklahoma. You might recall that this is the same university, here it comes already, of the so-called 20th hijacker, Zachariah Moussaoui. He attended about 6 months worth of schooling there for a flight school, supposedly, right before his August trip in 2001 to Minneapolis-St. Paul, where he wanted to fly the 747 simulator. That happened in mid-August 2001. Well, Boren and Tenet go way back. They go way back in time. Boren was the chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, key word, and Tenet was first a staffer from 1985, and then he became the staff director in 88 until 93. All of this under the chairmanship of David Boren. And David Boren is often referred to as George Tenet's mentor. Tenet became the first deputy director of the CIA in 1995. Then he became the full-fledged director in 96, and he remained there head of CIA till 2004. Boren became the president of the university in 94, and he was there until 2018. So we're seeing a pretty good lock-in to the university now. Now, you might or you might not recall that when Mohammed Atta and his friend, let's call him Marwan for short, arrived in the spring of 2000, they landed in Newark, New Jersey. About a month later, they managed to stumble across the University of Oklahoma. Well, they wanted to check out a flight school there, they say, and they were there over the 4th of July weekend and decided to move on down to Florida, which is what they did. But they go back to the university later. You may or may not recall also that the religious Jewish kid named Nick Berg, who was also at the University of Oklahoma, even though he wasn't a student there, but he shared his email account and his password with Zachariah Moussaoui, the 20th hijacker. What an interesting connection. They were riding a bus together around the campus. And so let's go on now. By the way, this intelligence connection runs even deeper than this, because check this out. In August of 2001, right before 9/11, a guy named David Edger, he was the CIA station chief, or chief of station, they say, in Berlin, Germany. He's the same guy who was surveilling the now infamous Hamburg cell with Mohammed Atta, Marwan, and they say Ziad Jarrah. But he actually didn't live in that area. Anyway, digress. His friend David Boren invited him to the University of Oklahoma to take a sabbatical from the CIA and begin teaching some class on, well, things terrorism. Well, now I found some documents that implied that he was actually persona non grata in Germany because he'd been harassing some, imagine this, foreign students or something like that. Anyway, might I remind you also about the connection that we got from the WikiLeaks. where the British intelligence had notified the former NSA guy named Wayne Madsen, telling him that the Israeli Mossad had infiltrated and were running the Hamburg cell for the 9/11 operation. It was total Israeli operations, what he said about 9/11. Well, now I've also found that Mohammed Atta and a few others showed up in Norman, Oklahoma in August, just a few weeks before the 9/11 operation. We don't know what they did there. We don't know who they talked to, but we know who was there. I know it's really starting to look like 9/11 was an intelligence operation, and there's a reason for that, and we're going to wrap it up at the end here. And now many people are out there knowingly telling us, that respected scholars like Jeff Sachs and others, they're out there on YouTube, they're out there talking, they're saying this: the CIA and the Mossad actually are connected at the hip. They're one unit. As they say, they are the same exact entity. So let's quickly recap. Two guys, Atta and Marwan, from the Hamburg cell arrive in New Jersey, end up at the University of Oklahoma. They come back a few weeks before 9/11 to the University of Oklahoma. Between July of 2000, when they first show up, and September 2001, we also have the so-called 20th hijacker show up on campus, and the religious Jewish Zionist boy who shares his email and password. The FBI connects those two. They have a hard time tracking down Nick Berg because he also had a habit of making bombs, and they didn't know where he was for 9/11. Anyway, maybe or maybe not, he gets beheaded in Iraq in 2004. We don't know. The incident made such a splash on the internet, but nobody with half a brain believed any of it was real. You might also remember there was a bombing at the federal building in Oklahoma City, called the Alfred P. Murrah building. That was in April of 1995. Bill Clinton was the president at the time. George Tenet was involved as, I think he was the deputy director of the CIA. And David Edger was in place, David Boren was in place at the university. David Edger, we don't know about him. We know that he wasn't in Germany until 97, however. There's more information on him, but it's not very easy to find. I've really had a hard time because he was in clandestine operations. You know what that means. Likely he was at Langley, but we don't know for sure. There's one really crazy connection here. The director of the CIA, 3 accused terrorists, 1 religious Zionist Jewish boy, a CIA officer of 30 years, and a U.S. senator, former president of the school, the former head of the Senate Select Intelligence Committee. Now, that's one crazy connection. 7 people all connect to the 9/11 story or the Central Intelligence Agency and or the Mossad, because they are kind of all one. All of them connect to the 9/11 operation. So what do you think? Was it a terrorist attack, or was it an intelligence operation?